So I'm not sure if you've heard of this guy because he is electric. He might be the next Adam Schefter. His name is, of course, Mr. John Frascella. Make sure you say it the Italian name.
Italian. Thank you.
Mr. Frascella. I finally got him in here for an interview. So without further ado, welcome to Real Coverage. I am your host, Nick. This is going to be a great one.
Hey, I thought it was all over.
Nope. They roll coverage.
I just first of all want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on, Mr. John Frascella. So this way I can make sure I get it the right Italian way. But just thank you for taking the time out of your day just to come on here and talk about football. I started Roll Coverage with one simple thing: sports for sports sake. So we don't need a reason, just here to talk about ball. But how do you feel about your team, where you're moving forwards?
Well, I mean, I think for the Jets, the main thing is they know they're on a short timeline, right? I mean, that's the main thing. You got Rodgers. You figure you got this year. If it goes okay, maybe we'll squeeze one more year out of him. So I feel good about the 2-year window, provided he can stay healthy. But after that, you have a reset again, right? I don't think Jordan Travis is going to be a long-term franchise quarterback. I think he's more like a backup quarterback. Okay. So I don't view him as taking over for Rodgers and being the next guy. So figure, if it's 2 years from now, you're going to need a complete reset from the Jets organization in terms of the quarterback position.
Yeah, and assuming you guys actually get, like, say, 10-plus wins or make it to a Super Bowl or something, your picks are going to be essentially not of the same value that they were last year. And now with the possible talks of Davante Adams coming in, that could be an interesting one. Garrett Wilson, Davante Adams, Breece Hall. I mean, that's a pretty solid offense, but you're right. It 100% hinges on Aaron Rodgers. I'm surprised to hear you say that Jordan Travis won't be a good, or at least I shouldn't say good, a long-term starting quarterback in the NFL, because I thought him going there was like, ooh, man, maybe Rodgers has like a funky year this year and they throw him out later on. Yeah, that could be interesting.
I feel like he would have gone earlier in the draft, especially because when there's an injury situation, if the guy's like elite, he'll still go earlier than what Travis went. I mean, he fell really far.
Yeah.
So I think that says a lot about where teams valued him. I think the Jets liked him from the beginning because I had heard that from people that I know that are associated with the Jets. So yeah, I heard that. If you could actually check my feed, I had one maybe like 2 months before the draft that said he was most likely to go to the Jets. That's the way it was going to roll out.
Dude, when he went there, you're right, he went later, and I didn't even think about the idea that people will kind of overlook the injury, because when I saw Jordan Travis, I mean, there was a point where he might win a Heisman. If he doesn't get hurt, he's probably a Heisman winner, and maybe Jaden Daniels doesn't go to the Commanders. Instead, it's a Jordan Travis.
He's got the scrambling game, that's for sure.
He really does. And not only that, on top of that, I think that learning from somebody to the level of Aaron Rodgers is something that can't be on everybody. So if Jordan Travis is able to take even a quarter of what Aaron Rodgers has ability-wise and apply it to what he was able to do in college, it could be interesting. But I do agree, in 2 years or a year, you guys might be in the situation of Jordan Travis isn't ready, so you have to go see somebody else.
Right. I think what they'll probably do at that time is either draft another quarterback or bring in a veteran quarterback to hold for like a year or two. And then, and see at that point whether or not, if they draft someone and say the second or third round that year and they like them long term, they can hang on to them. Or you could do the stopgap situation. Back to the Jets, I just think that it won't be a long-term situation with Travis. He'd have to come back 100% healthy, and he'd have to wow people right away for them to say, okay, we're going to take a chance on a competition with a lesser guy and see how he comes out on the other end. I don't see it that way. I see it more of maybe they're hoping he could be like a long-term backup quarterback, like maybe like a Davis Mills, right? Davis Mills with the Texans. He got a little opportunity to start, but long-term, he's going to be the backup for CJ Stroud. That's what he is. He's a young quarterback that you can hold on to. And I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere else. Travis has more physical ability than Davis Mills, but in terms of the role, I think the role might be similar.
What about something like maybe the Colts going and giving him as a backup then to Anthony Richardson, since he's more of a physical kind of, obviously he's a freakazoid when it comes to the physical abilities. But if you're saying they're both kind of that physical quarterback, that might be something down the road. But since we're both on quarterback possible replacement watch, I want to ask you, which team next year most likely is replacing their quarterback, the Carolina Panthers or the New York Jets?
That's a good question. I would say most likely it's going to be the Jets.
I think so too.
Rodgers, it could go if it goes really well for the Jets, they could win the whole thing. That's because they have a top 3 defense. And you know what? They won 7 games last year with the worst quarterback play combined that I've ever seen. I mean, a team with that kind of quarterback play should only win 2 games maximum, and they won 7. On top of that, they lost 4 or 5 games in the last 2 minutes. So they actually could have won 10 because their defense was so good. So I would say most likely in that scenario, the Jets could win the Super Bowl, at which point Rodgers would quit. He'd be done. He'd be like, I served my purpose. Maybe I'll go into politics or maybe I'll go on TV. He would be done. And also, I think that if Dave Canales likes Bryce Young at all, he's not going to think 1 year is enough to evaluate him.
I would agree with that.
The missing piece is, what does Canales think about Bryce Young?
Yeah, and that's going to be the big thing for Carolina this year. Like last year, there was obviously the shift of a bunch of coaches, but obviously we're retaining Evero, but we're essentially doing the exact same thing again. We're bringing in a new OC that, of course, has rapport with Canales. They've worked together for a few years, but Canales at that time was only a one-time play caller, first-time OC. His new OC is going to be a first-time OC, non-play calling OC. So he's just going to be assisting Canales and Brad Idzik. So it's going to be an interesting thing. Like, is the offense going to take that measurable step forwards? Because I personally think my Carolina Panthers take 2 steps forwards in the offense and 1 step back with the defense. The opposite of what I think you guys are going to do. I think that the Jets have the opportunity to have, again, a top 3 defense, but it's going to be more of where can Aaron Rodgers bring them? If he can bring them to the playoffs, I think he has absolutely the ability to bring them to a Super Bowl. And of course, if you add Devontae Adams, that would skyrocket. But obviously, there's a lot of conflicting reports coming out about that as well, about maybe he doesn't really want to go there, or maybe Rodgers doesn't really want him there. But I don't know. You guys are literally, it's all on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders. And that's the tough part coming from Carolina. Like, it's not on Bryce's shoulders. It wasn't even last year, in my opinion. I was very critical. I told everybody we were only going to win 4 games. And I caught a ton of shit for it. But I just try to tell people, like, look at the roster. If you think Laviska Shenault is the savior, you need to turn off Madden. Like,
I remember that. There were a lot of arguments that I saw between, like, the Saints fans and the Panthers fans before last season. The Saints were like, oh, we got Derek Carr. We're going to be great. And all these acquisitions that they made. And the Panthers fans said, oh, we got the number 1 pick, Bryce Young, and we got Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen had a good year, by the way. He did well, I think, given the circumstances. They got DJ Chark. They got Hayden Hurst. They got Miles Sanders. I remember that some people were hyped up about that stuff. But no, I just overall, I mean, you've probably seen on my Twitter or X, if you want to call it.
A number 1 follow, by the way. Number 1 follow on Twitter.
I appreciate that. That's at NFL Frascella. And I mean, I just was not impressed by Bryce Young. I happened to catch about 4 or 5 of his games. And the way that I evaluate quarterbacks is throw to throw. I am watching and charting every throw. For example, I saw Zach Wilson early with the Jets, and I was in your spot where you took flack with your fans. Yeah. I, after 2 games, said Zach Wilson has a lot of talent. He'll never be good because he's the type of guy that cannot consistently throw a 1-yard pass. He could not throw a flat. He cannot throw an out consistently without bouncing it at somebody's feet. I'm like, anybody who's in the NFL that's a professional quarterback makes that throw with their eyes closed every time. They may not make the 20-yard seam route throw on time. They may turn some balls over. That's going to happen with young quarterbacks. But when I watch, like, Bryce Young missed a lot of slants last year, high, over the middle, a lot of slants over the middle. So he missed a lot of slants over the middle and a lot of easy throws that, you know, the fans will say in hindsight, it was everything around him that was the problem. But when you're watching game tape, you could look at certain throws and say, wait a minute, that was an easy throw that anybody could make. And he missed a lot of those. Now, that could be from a lack of rhythm. It could be a lack of experience. But
lack of confidence,
which comes from a bad situation. So, you know, I do think things will be better with Canales because he's more up to date on the way offensive systems are run now. And he did a really good job for Baker Mayfield with Tampa Bay. But I don't think it'll get there in 1 year for Carolina, which is put you in a decision after this year, right? If Carolina wins 6 games this year, you have to make a decision the year after. I personally don't view Bryce Young as that type of quarterback. I view him more like Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock. I see him in that like category of quarterback to me.
Thank you, because that's exactly what I said. I even did the thing of like, which rookie season would you rather have? And there was 3 of them, and it was Daniel Jones, Bryce Young, or Josh Rosen. And everyone's like, oh, like Josh Rosen did this. I was like, Josh Rosen only played like 12 games and had like almost 3,000 yards. Bryce played 16. Like, he wasn't able to get it done. But of course, it's the situation. It's, the owner trying to backstab the head coach, just everything that was going on behind the scenes. And of course, when you tell a head coach, hey, man, you could pick your guy, and then you veto the pick. I think the Canales one is going to be an interesting one. I made a video previously where I said if Canales doesn't get at least 6 wins, David Tepper will at least have the conversation, whether or not it's with his wife or maybe with part of the front office on, is Dave Canales the right option? Now, obviously, he's got a lot of a pedigree coming from the Pete Carroll and then obviously the short tenure in Tampa. But I think the one thing that we keep overlooking is they had 2 top-tier, guaranteed top 10 duos at minimum, wide receivers. In Seattle with, I always want to say Godwin, but it's not. It's DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. There we go. And then obviously Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in Tampa. But the other thing that we don't look at those situations is the stability of the franchise as a whole. Like, the Bucs were just coming off of a Tom Brady Super Bowl run, so they were kind of had all their ducks in a row and everything like that. And the one thing we've always heard about Pete Carroll is Pete Carroll's smart. He makes sure he stays on top of it. He's super involved with everything. I mean, I remember when he drafted DK Metcalf, he took his shirt off and everything. Like, that's building the culture long term. Carolina doesn't have that. So as much as I would love to say, and again, I did a 9-part Dave Canales mini series breaking down like where he went, all this different stuff. And I still have so much hesitancy with it because of, to be honest, Bryce's size and what he did last year. Like, if we literally just pluck out the Packers game, he's got like 2,400 passing yards and 9 touchdowns over 15 games. That is god awful. That's backup level numbers. That's somebody got hurt in the middle of the season and your dude came in. So if he doesn't make a measurable jump, like if Bryce Young is at 27 total touchdowns, rushing and passing, I don't know really where we're at. I think that we're going back to what we were talking about before. We're in that Daniel Jones situation. And now, like, obviously the next big quarterback's going to get paid and everything. And I love seeing all the very delusional Carolina Panthers fans say he's going to get $75, $100 million a year. And I'm like, you guys are getting mad that Daniel Jones is getting 40 and you want to give this guy double? That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the thing with Daniel Jones, people forget so quickly. I mean, he played about as well as he possibly could play 2 seasons ago, right? I mean, they went to the playoffs. He had a good mix of run and pass. People don't realize he was 5th in the league in rushing yards for quarterbacks 2 years ago. He beat Kirk Cousins straight up. Cousins played a good game in the playoff game, but Minnesota was 13-4. So they didn't go in there with the Giants team and
I forgot
beat a
about
Minnesota
that.
It was a road game. So they played a road game at Minnesota, which is one of the loudest crowds by decibels in the league. So they played at Minnesota, and Cousins played well. Jefferson played well, but the Vikings defense played terrible. But Daniel Jones carved them up. So, I mean, when you really look at it, you chop it up in terms of the quarterback position. There aren't a lot of quarterbacks even right now that have gone on the road and won a playoff game. It's a small list. It's everyone you can think of. And then you have the secondary guys, right? Like we were saying, like Bryce Young might be in a category like Daniel Jones, like Darnold, like Baker Mayfield's actually past those guys now. But he really accomplished a lot. 2 years ago, he accomplished a lot, Daniel Jones. So, I mean, I don't know if he can get back to that because that was almost like a perfect storm because people were not high on the Giants. So there wasn't a lot of pressure on them that year. Daboll was really locked in because it was early in his tenure. So he had a lot of stuff that he wanted to unleash from his bag of tricks. So I don't know if they have those tricks again this year, but that was a good season. But I mean, back to Canales, I disagree about the Bucs part. The Bucs last year were a laughingstock going into the season. So whether or not they won the championship with Tom Brady a couple of years ago, going into last year, there was a clip that they showed online that Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield could not even complete a pass during minicamp. I don't know if you remember, it got like 5 million hits.
Yeah, I remember that because my biggest concern for them was Kyle Trask. But I'm going to be honest, I've always been a tiny bit of a Baker guy, even though I'm not a Cleveland Brown supporter. What he did there and was able to do, and then you all of a sudden drop Deshaun Watson in and he can't do it. I'm like, wow, maybe Baker does have a little bit of something, because that's kind of what I thought Bryce would be, a little bit more of a compact version of Baker.
Right.
You know, a little bit errant throws at time, maybe a little bit of arrogance, even though Bryce has never shown any of that. At some point when he goes out there and gets a win, he's going to do something where people would be like, oh, look, he looks arrogant. It's like, he's a former number 1 pick, both of them.
Yep.
So yeah, I can kind of see that too. But at the same time, Baker won it a Heisman in a situation in college where it wasn't like Bryce. Bryce was in arguably one of the best programs in the nation, did all that stuff. Whereas, you know, Baker kind of came from that whole college thing in Oklahoma, where he just came out there and lit it up with Lincoln Riley. But it was mostly from his arm talent, as opposed to Bryce, where he had an all-star defense, an all-star cast. Like, he doesn't have a Jamison Williams on this team anymore, or any of those players from Alabama. So,
yeah,
but
I don't think Bryce has the swagger of Baker Mayfield, and I think the swagger it's important. And Baker Mayfield on his intermediate throws is very precise. Right. So if you go from like 8 to 20 yards, he's very good. So they're going to hope that Bryce Young could do the same. But what Canales did, I thought was quite impressive, because you got to remember, I know Todd Bowles very well, having covered the Jets for my entire life. Right. So Todd Bowles, you know, he's just a defensive coordinator. He's not a head coach.
Yeah.
He runs good practices. He's very professional. People will tell you he runs the best practices in the league. Everybody it's like being in the Army or being in the Navy. Everything is like to a T. So he's great at that. But once the lights come on in the game, he's just worried about the defense, sort of like Robert Saleh with the Jets now.
Okay.
So Canales, what he was able to do last year, which, I mean, Baker Mayfield now has shown it to you in 3 spots. He made the playoffs with the Browns. They felt that there was a cap on how much they could accomplish with him. So they moved on from that. Then he went to the Rams in the middle of the season without knowing the plays and played extremely well. Right. So people forget that. Like, that's how he got the job in Tampa Bay. They looked at the tape and said, wait a minute, that guy came in the middle of the season and learned the plays and sat down with McVay and was able to move the offense when Stafford got injured.
Like that. Like
they won the
turnkey.
first game. They won the first game. So that caught a lot of people's attention. And now you go to the Bucs, who, again, people were making fun of them before the season. Their over-under in Vegas last year, I think, was 5 wins. They won the division. They won a playoff game. And then they almost beat the Lions. They had the Lions down to the last possession, who were arguably the best team. So Baker Mayfield is just, you know, he's just better than Bryce Young. I don't think you're going to see Bryce Young have the ability to switch teams like that and then produce. I don't think that's going to happen.
I agree. If he was to switch teams, to be honest, it's going to be after next year. This one would have to be like a 21 touchdown season where it still looks good. It's positive, but it's not really that measurable jump forward, especially with an offensive coach, offensive scheme, a ton of offensive weapons, upgrading on the offensive line and the whole bit, and you're basically pushing everything to that side of the bowl. Like, even now, I will stand 10 toes down that I believe we're going to finish, again, the 32nd best pass rush in the league. Like, I don't think that Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wanham are going to be able to generate the pressure, especially because, yes, we're going to be able to put up points, but there's going to be a certain time where they're just going to start going after our secondary and everything like that. And if we can't get that pass rush in, what's the point? We're going to get carved up. So yeah, I could see kind of the Bucs thing, but I've always thought of them as a little bit more of a stable organization compared to Carolina. Like, family, I'm a Florida native, grew up there forever. Family are diehard Bucs fans and everything like that. Obviously, when Jameis and Mariota came out, it was a great time for them. But I just imagined post Brady that obviously they still have some of the pieces together and everyone's at least kind of pushing in the same direction. Whereas we were coming off of our owner, ripping the, what was it? I can't remember the name of the city here in South Carolina, but where he ripped that project out for the practice facility that he was building. It was like Oak Hill or something like that. Threw ice at a fan, did all that stuff. So there was so much going on behind the scenes that I just felt like nothing Carolina could all get in unison. And now I feel like, yes, Canales is getting a little bit better of an opportunity here, but is Bryce good enough to meet Canales's level that he really wants? Because 22 touchdowns is not a Canales run offense. And if we want to lean heavy on the run, that's great. We're going to generate a lot of, play action and everything like that. But he's not a run first quarterback. He's more of a, escape here or there. And he's also coming off of 62 or 64 sack season. So he needs to stay upright and get the ball out quick. So I love the 2.7 seconds from Canales, but Bryce had 2.85 seconds on average last year to throw the ball. So we're giving him less time to throw the ball now, essentially. So I don't understand that. But I want to go back to something you said about Daboll specifically. I think this could be an interesting time where the Giants defense finishes top 10 and the Giants offense is able to do enough with Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt to get about a 10-win season and really fight in that division. I think they're going to be a out of nowhere team that all of a sudden wins a lot of these random close games. And of course, the offseason with Hard Knocks is giving us a beautiful look behind the scenes. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think with the Giants, I think you hit the nail on the head on the close games, right? I mean, for a team that we already know is not going to blow people out, the difference in them being 5-12 and being 10-7 is winning those field goal games, the games that are winning a field goal. So, and it happens every year. I mean, one team I always give the example of was the Jacksonville Jaguars team with Blake Bortles.
Yes.
That had Jalen Ramsey. That team was not, if you watch them game to game, and I did a lot because I'm in the AFC, I'm a Jets fan, and the Patriots were a big deal at the time. I watched them a lot. They did not impress me one time the entire season, but there they were. They were in the AFC Championship game, and they were winning with 3 minutes to go in the game against the Patriots because every time they were in a close game, their defense made a stop, or they made the field goal at the end, or both. They got the combination of both. So
exactly.
For the Giants, for the Giants, it's going to be that type of situation. I mean, the way that you're laying it out and the way you're comparing it is sort of almost like last year's Jets, right? Last year's Jets, they were on the fringe of being better than 7 wins because of their defense. So if the Giants are going to be that good, it's going to be because of their defense. Obviously, Thibodeau, they got your guy Burns. They have some other guys in place that they already feel very confident about. So that's the way it would have to be done. I'm not sure. One benefit to them is the juice on the under. If you get into the betting side of it, for the Cowboys, for the Cowboys, juice on the under is super, super high. It's like minus 185 that they'll be under 10.5 wins. So in other words, you got to risk $185 to only win 100 for them to go under 10.5 wins. So that's virtually a lock that they're not going to go over 10.5 wins. So that leaves a couple extra wins on the table in the division, right? The Eagles, we got to see how they bounce back. Last year was weird. Right, that Eagles no-show performance in the playoffs against the Bucs was shocking to me. And then to see the guys fighting with Hurts on the sideline and making a scene when you know the cameras are around, to me was very shocking that something was way off with that team. I think it was the offensive coordinator. It came out later on that nobody was happy with the schemes, right? So obviously they've had turnover there. But that's something to keep an eye on, because if the Eagles are a step down or the same as last year and the Cowboys are a step down, it does open the door for the Giants to bounce back. I don't have a lot of confidence in them because if something happens with Jones, I have no confidence in Drew Lock. I'm not a Drew Lock guy at all. I've studied his film from the beginning, and he's the same quarterback he was when he got drafted. He's shown no evolution whatsoever. So, they would need to win the close games, period. And they would also need the Commanders to be off to a slow start with the rookie quarterback for everything to go right for the Giants. They need a step down from the Cowboys, a stay the same status quo, or even worse from the Eagles. And then they need the Commanders to get off slow in order for the Giants to do well.
I think that division could be the division that ends up with 3 playoff teams again. And I think the one that could be the one that's going to miss it, and it's going to be a weird one, I bet you it's going to be something like the Eagles or the Cowboys. I could see a thing where the Cowboys absolutely implode this year. There's been all the offseason stuff with Micah Parsons, the contract stuff with Dak. They're obviously trying to figure out what's going to, what's next. Obviously, the Eagles have a lot of weapons and everything like that. But like you said, can they actually put it all together? Man, if one of the things that you recently posted on Twitter about Brandon Ayuk, if he ends up going to a place like a Commanders, they have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Ayuk. They've got a pretty decent running back room, and as long as the defense can go out there, they might be an 8-9 win team and might be able to sneak into a wild card. And then there's your 3 teams. But again, that would be
tough, right? But you know how it is with rookies. I mean, if a rookie clicks, like speaking of Washington, the way Robert Griffin clicked in his first year, if it just goes off and it pops off like that, yeah, it can go your way. A lot of teams seem to be competing for Jaden Daniels' services. I would say that the confidence level amongst the executives in the league seems to be pretty high in Jaden Daniels. But just for me, I would peg him more as a strong year coming as a sophomore as opposed to a rookie. Just because you got to get used to the reads. You have a couple of tough teams in the division. You have defensive speed in the division, so that it could be disorienting when you've been looking at college reads and then you're going against the pass rush that you're going to get from some of those teams in their area. It could be disoriented. It could take a year of practice just getting used to that speed. Maybe they win 6 games or something like that, and then they go up a level the year after. That's the way I would peg it. But I mean, that defense, just in general in that division, it's almost status quo to me right now. I'm not like totally. They don't knock my socks off. You know what I mean? There's for sure when I think about the NFC right now, I'm thinking about the 49ers, thinking about the Lions, I'm thinking about the Rams if they could stay healthy. Right, those 3 teams definitely are scary to me. Obviously, the Eagles and the Cowboys are on the list, but I'm not like over the top ecstatic about them. And the Packers, to me, the Packers, the way they run their organization and how everything is tip top, and how they were able to have the youngest team in 20 years go as far as it did last year. The Packers are going the right way. The Lions are going the right way for sure. And then you just got to keep an eye out. Like if you think the Commanders could be a threat, then the Bears could be a threat, right? With Caleb Williams and their receiving core. So I just think the safe teams are the Lions, the 49ers, the Packers, and the Rams. Those are the safe teams. And then the Eagles would be right there behind them. After that, anybody could step up in the NFC.
I would say those 4 are just a solid, nice lock-in 4. I would agree with you. And yeah, there's so much to change. Like rookie quarterbacks not only coming in, Caleb Williams, like you said, Jaden Daniels. And then, of course, you got the Patriots who might decide to start Drake May over Jacoby Brissett, which a lot of people are just saying start Jacoby, let Drake, start sometime in October or something like that, and then go from there. But it's going to be a really interesting one this year regardless. I want to know your one pick, though. Who is the one person that you are most excited about to be introduced? Doesn't matter if it's offense or defense, but the one person people should be looking out for in the next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be Marvin Harrison because I think the Cardinals are a surprise team. That's why. So I have the Cardinals as my surprise team in the NFC, and I have the Titans as my surprise team in the AFC. So with the Cardinals as my surprise team and the amount of talent that Marvin Harrison Jr. has, and I watched his dad's every single snap, and the Colts at that time were so fun to watch with Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison Sr. and Reggie Wayne and all those guys, Dallas Clark at the tight end position. So I saw his entire career in his prime. So when you look at Marvin Jr., who's more physically powerful and stronger than his dad, and you put him on a team that might be on the come up, I think he's the guy to watch. But I always like receivers, so Malik Neighbors too. I think if the Giants are going to take a step up, it's going to be on his shoulders. If he's going to be like an Antonio Brown type, elite type receiver, I think that, those 2 guys, Harrison and Neighbors. Obviously, the quarterbacks we're going to have to see because there's so many of them that are rookies this year, right? So we have to see how that develops. But at the wide receiver position, it's definitely those 2 guys. Because Odunze with Chicago, he's going to have competition with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. So I think that Harrison and Neighbors are the guys that have the most opportunity to stand out as rookies.
I would agree with that. I think one of the ones that I really like, especially the ones that went to weird places that I think they could really have the opportunity to break out. Of course, Malik Neighbors with the Giants. I didn't even think about the Marvin Harrison comparison, but of course he's going to be arguably the number 1 wide receiver talent in a while to come into the NFL. But just some weird names. Bub Means. I think he could be an interesting one. There was a kid that got drafted to the Bucs, running back, Bucky Brooks kid. Mm-hmm. That kid, he looks amazing. The kid out of Oregon. And then the other one was Jalen McMillan. I can't remember where he went, but he's behind somebody who is just going to be able to give him the opportunity. I cannot remember. I'm going to look it up now that it's drawn a blank. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. And then the one thing that I think is going to be another one is the New England wide receiver room. I think the wide receiver room is going to have a lot of changes. Drake May is obviously going to be able to help with that, but that wide receiver room has a lot of good young talent that they need to develop with Drake May. So if they do decide to do that, I think they should also, elevate those guys. Jalen McMillan, he plays for Tampa.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be a good one. So he's a great wide receiver 3 there because, no offense, he's probably going to get there pretty quickly. So, yeah, there's so many great options. It's just more of whose year is it this year? I'm going to stand 10 toes down right now with you on here. The Chiefs are not winning a Super Bowl. I will take any bet right now that anybody's willing to give me. There's no way. I'll take any other team but them because I think this is the year where they finally, like Travis Kelce, starts to see that slump year. And, they really just don't have it. Or maybe Xavier Worthy isn't the guy that everybody thought he was, and that 4.21 speed isn't able to translate in the same way that Tyreek Hill was. Obviously, he showed that he didn't need it with just using Rashid Rice. But I just don't believe in the Chiefs this year. I think this is the one year where I think everybody should pretty much fade them. Are they going to win 10 games? It's possible, but I just don't see it happening in the postseason, especially given, like, the Titans. Didn't they go get Snead?
Yeah, they got Snead from them. But the one thing with the Chiefs is this is the second year now in the last 3 where they weren't impressive during the regular season, and they still won the Super Bowl. So that's the one caveat you got to – it wasn't last year, I mean, people forget, right? What happens is the team wins the Super Bowl and they go, oh, yeah, it's the Chiefs. They were the best team. They won. They were not the best team. If you watch the season, they went through long stretches where they could get nothing going. You remember the incident when Mahomes threw his helmet and he was flipping out at the team? The reason was because nothing was working. Nothing they were doing was working, and they still won the Super Bowl. So that's why you have to watch when you fade the Chiefs. Like, obviously, if you're playing a numbers game, most likely they're not going to repeat because nobody's had a three-peat, and there's 32 teams. So there's a 1 out of 32 chance that they're going to do it again. You know what I mean? So the odds are against it if you want to look at it that way, but you also have to look at what it takes in terms of championship makeup. So they're the type of team that when things are ugly and they're not playing well, they still find a way to win. Now, that way to win could be any number of ways for them, which is why they get to where they are. Andy Reid is probably the best coach of all time. Sometimes the game ends up in Mahomes' hands and he gets it done. Sometimes it's the defensive line with Chris Jones. Sometimes they get pressure at the end of the game and that's it. It's lights out. Sometimes it's Harrison Butker. He's hit a lot of big kicks for them. Sometimes it's the referees, right? Sometimes there's calls that give them a second chance, like the Bengals. So if you look at the list of things that are in the Chiefs' favor, they're still always going to be in it at the end as long as Reed, Mahomes, Kelsey, and Jones are available. Those 4 guys, they're always going to be in the mix. Yes, it's highly unlikely that they can repeat, but if they can win ugly, that's the mark of a good team. That's the mark of the best team. They win ugly. If you look at what they did in that Ravens game, they had one good drive. They won. It was the first drive of the game.
Yep.
They drove down and scored. The rest of the game, they knew the Ravens made adjustments on defense. They were like, what we're doing, guys, for now on is don't turn the ball over and make Lamar Jackson make a mistake. At the end of the game, they changed their whole style because everybody who knows and studied the Chiefs last year knows that everything they were doing was underneath. They had no shot. The shots downfield were way less. The shots 25 yards plus were way less. Everything was underneath. So that first drive against the Ravens, it worked. They threw underneath to Kelsey. They hit the big 4th down play where he dove and he caught it. They got the touchdown. Done deal. They got the 7 points. After that, the Ravens got up press coverage, and there was nothing the Chiefs could do. So they said, we have to change everything we're doing. We can't suddenly start taking 40-yard shots. We don't have it. We don't have that in our offense this year. It's not working. So they had to lean on their defense, change their whole style, and make them make a mistake. That's what the Chiefs can do. Other teams can't morph like that. Like the Ravens were a better team than Chiefs, period. The Lions were a better team than the Chiefs, period. The 49ers were beating them 10-0 in the Super Bowl. There was a no contest. They're a better team. But when things get tough, these other teams fold up, and the Chiefs don't. So that's the one thing you got to keep in your back pocket.
I couldn't have hit it any more on the head, but I am going to leave it at that. I, of course, love you coming on with me today, man. I appreciate you taking the time. Of course, taking the time a little bit away from the family as well. If you're not following this man, Mr. John Frascella at NFL Frascella on Twitter. You don't have a YouTube yet. If you ever decide to do one, I'll definitely be a subscriber. But make sure you go subscribe to this guy. His tag has been on the screen the entire time. Just thank you again. And I hope, obviously, to see you some more. Bring you back on.
Thank you so much. Next time we'll talk about, the career and how everything started. We'll get to that on next time.
Heck yeah.
I appreciate you having me on, and certainly we'll do it again in the future. You're a good man. I wish you all the best with the podcast.
And I wish you the best, man. Of course, I'm a devout follower, and I will continue to be. Anytime you post something out there, I don't want you to ever leave Twitter again. So whatever I need to do that, if I need to come to New York and help you out myself, that's what I'm going to do.